'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis the gift to be free, 'tis the gift to come down where you ought to be. And when you find yourself in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight.
When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right.
'Tis the gift to be simple, 'tis the gift to be true, 'tis the gift to labor till the day is through. And when you find yourself in the place so fine, will be in the cool of the birch and the pine. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right. 'Tis the gift to be joyful, 'tis the gift to be free, 'tis the gift, 'tis the gift, 'tis the simple gift to be. And when you find yourself filled with pure delight,
Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Berkeley. I'm Reverend Marcus Liefert, and I wish you a happy daylight savings time to those who celebrate. My condolences to those who don't. We'll see, there's always a few who show up right at noon on this day. Welcome, welcome. If you're visiting with us for the first time, I especially want to welcome you. We hope that no matter who you are or how you make your living, no matter whom you love or how you experience the sacred, you will feel welcome here among us in the fullness of your being. Everyone's invited to stick around after the service for lunch. Make your way all the way through the atrium into the social hall. We try and make lunch happen every Sunday. We're always looking for people to come help out with making it or cleaning up after it, so come join the kitchen team if you're so moved. We acknowledge each week as we gather here at the intersection of arts, justice, and spirituality that we gather on the unceded territory of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people. We know that this land, Huchiun, is a place where we have inherited a broken covenant, and we hope that we will have the humility and the courage to do our part, to heal what's been broken, to live into a new solidarity with indigenous peoples and the earth. And on that note, there's a gathering this evening. Our Social Justice Council potluck happens once a month on a Sunday evening. It's at 5:30, so if you can come on back tonight. The thing that we're doing this month is getting ready for the whole church to participate in the No Kings rally on March the 28th. So coming up at the end of this month, yeah. I know we've got little red hats, we've got people making signs, we've got people getting involved in all sorts of ways. We're going to have a big mass of us down in Oakland at the march. We're going to have people sit in vigil on the Arlington. So there's going to be lots of ways to participate. Come find out more this evening at the Social Justice Council potluck. There's a memory book at the back of the sanctuary. If there's ever something on your heart that you'd like lifted up aloud during our service, a grief or a gratitude or joy or sorrow, you can write it there and we'll say it aloud during our pastoral prayer. You're also always invited to simply light a candle for a silent memory or prayer. We are in a season of worship that we're calling Rising Up Through Fire and Ash. How do we tend to the fires that we need to stoke our own commitments, our own inspiration, the warmth of community as we live in this time of tremendous transformation and all of the ashes that entails. So before we sing our first hymn this morning, would you rise in body or in spirit and turn to the back of the sanctuary where that red dot shows those visiting us on Zoom, on YouTube or Facebook. We're so glad you're here. And then just turn to one another. Wish a happy Sunday this morning.
Compassion and strength, gather to celebrate. united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit growing in all, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun. Winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again.
I'd like to invite my wife, Elizabeth J., up to light the chalice with these words by Sarah Eileen Lawal. Out of the flames of fear, we rise with courage of our deepest convictions to stand for justice, inclusion, and peace. Out of the flames of scrutiny, we rise to proclaim our faith with hope to heal a fractured and hurting world. Out of the flames of doubt, we rise to embrace the mystery, wonder, and awe of all there is and all yet to be. Out of the flames of hate, we rise with the force of love, love that celebrates our shared humanity. Out of the flames, we rise.
You're going to learn something now, so stand up. I'm going to sing this song through once. It was written after 9/11 by Linda Allen, and then I'm going to teach it from the end. We have been burned, burned by the fire, and we are ashes, ashes and smoke, but we will rise higher and higher on the wings of compassion, justice and hope. On the wings of compassion, justice and hope. Again. On the wings of compassion, justice and hope. But we will rise higher and higher. But we will rise higher and higher on the wings of compassion, justice and hope. And we are ashes, ashes and smoke. And we are ashes.
I'm going to tell you a story this morning about a woman named Aliyah Mohammed Bakir. And Aliyah Mohammed Bakir, this is a mostly true story. It is mostly true because I'm sure I'm getting a few details wrong, but the big picture is all here. And Aliyah was a librarian. I think librarians are just some of the most awesome people. And the librarians, yeah, you only call it out. And Aliyah had been a librarian in a city called Basra for 14 years. So she ran the central library, and she made it into a community center where people came and talked about books and talked about ideas and just hung out with each other. Because Aliyah loved people, but more than anything, Aliyah loved books. She just loved the books in her collection, and she was so happy to be a librarian. And then in 2003, the United States decided to invade her country, a country called Iraq. And Aliyah was immediately worried because the library in Basra was one of the biggest places in the city. And she was very worried that something bad was going to happen to the library and to the books. And so she went to the leader of the city and she said, "Could we move the books? I want them to be safe." And he said, "No. No, you can't move the books. Not only that, we're going to move the military operations into the library, and we're going to put guns on the top of the library to try to keep the invaders away." Aliyah thought, what can I do? So she kept going to work during this time, though people weren't really coming to the library anymore. And every night, Aliyah would put as many books as she possibly could in the trunk of her car, and in the back seat of her car, and in the front seat of her car, and she would take them home. And then the invaders came and took the city of Basra, and the military disappeared. And then she was very, very worried. And so she went to her neighbor who ran a pizza. Probably not pizza. He ran a restaurant just on the other side of the wall from the library. And she said, "Can you help me? We have to move the books. I am very, very worried that they're all going to be blown up by a bomb." And he thought, I run a restaurant, what can I do? But she really cares about the books. And so he said yes. And they took the curtains down from the library and they bundled up books. And they brought bags. And all the people in the neighborhood began to help. And they moved 30,000 books over a wall, and they put them in the restaurant next door. Try to imagine. Just books and books and books. There was no serving food at this point. It was just all books. They got 70% of the books out of the library, and 9 days later, the library was bombed and destroyed. But the books were safe. And so gradually, Aliyah began to send the books out into the community because they couldn't just stay in the restaurant the whole time. And so they went out into the community and they stayed there until it was safe to rebuild the library and bring the books back. So Aliyah, working with the people around her, saved the things that she loved the most. And that is my story. So, if you can rise and bow to your spirit and sing the children out with the Ashes song, we are all going to go out. We're going to go outside today because it's beautiful. Come on.
Just as
Me again. Good morning and happy International Women's Day to all. That's how I feel. I am so happy that I was asked to speak briefly about one of my favorite days of the year. So first, a little history. For those of you who are not aware of the history of International Women's Day, it basically started in the early 20th century when socialist feminists in the United States and Western Europe pretty much simultaneously decided that there should be a national day in every country so that people would pay attention to the plight and the rights of working women, particularly those suffering from abysmal conditions in factories and heavy responsibilities for their family's survival. They organized trade unions and demanded suffrage to change those conditions. And the people heard them singing, "Bread and roses, bread and roses." The practice caught on across Europe, and in 1917, women textile workers protesting against the Tsar for peace and bread on International Women's Day sparked the Russian Revolution. Their gumption forced Lenin to move his timeline up by a few months. The day became observed across the communist world on March 8th. In the mid-1970s, the global explosion of women's liberation movements got the attention of the United Nations. And in 1977, the UN's General Assembly, in typical UN speak, invited all states to proclaim, in accordance with their historical and national traditions and customs, any day of the year as United Nations Day for Women's Rights and International Peace, what we now know as International Women's Day. So estimates have it that it is celebrated or commemorated in some way in about 125 countries around the world, and in 27 of those countries, it is an official national holiday. Now, that's a lot of countries. What is the meaning of this day around the world, you might be wondering? Funny, you should ask. In a research project, my students at the University of San Francisco have looked into its commemoration in about 20 countries, and here's a trend that they have found. Governments that recognize the day do so to promote women's achievements in their societies. However, they understand that. For example, in Russia, where it remains a public holiday, Putin likes to hand out tulips and meat grinders. But women's movements and organizations take the opportunity to fight against an ever-widening agenda of inequality and on behalf of intersectional justice. For example, Iranian women took to the streets on International Women's Day in 1979 to protest the mandatory wearing of the hijab in government buildings. Theirs was the first mass protest against the then growing theocracy. Fast forward to 2017, women in 50 countries held a women's strike on International Women's Day. In calling for women to strike from both paid and unpaid labor, they were returning to the day's origins, but now, in alliances with unions, domestic workers' organizations, and grassroots activists, they called out misogynistic violence, racism, and the extractivist economic systems that are harming all of us and our precious environment. That is, talking about the very roots of global injustice. Reflecting on International Women's Day here at UUCB, on the heels of Catherine's call to all of us to develop personal elevator pitches for our UU faith, I realize that this day also has spiritual content for me. Now, I know that we UUs have taken an official turn towards the jet pig values that the children are learning about in RE. But I'll show my age by sharing the only two of the UU7 principles I could ever remember, which is probably why they're my favorites. Number one, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And number 7, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. That one was clearly written by committee, don't you think? Joined together, they capture how so many women and men and those arrayed across the beautiful gender spectrum continue to insist on individual rights and collective liberation through the fierce protection of peoples and the planet. On this International Women's Day, let's honor their work for justice as a spiritual practice. Thank you.
Long before there was an International Women's Day, there were some truly astonishing women, and one of them was named Hildegard von Bingen, best known as a visionary and abbess. The list of things she did in her time are really astonishing. Katie's going to sing part of one of her chants. She was a composer and poet, and we're going to sing an English version of the text of this chant later on to a melody by Vaughan Williams. But this is the original version of this chant, at least the first part of it.
I invite you to rest more deeply in your seat. To feel your connection down to this good, this holy earth, and feel your breath moving in and out. To turn inward with me. What is required of you? What is required of you but to act justly? To love mercy and walk humbly with your God. What is required of us? To feel enraged at the realities of war, sickened at the sight of missiles striking schools and hospitals, at war crimes committed in our names, to grieve the tragic loss, to lament in the face of cruelty, to feel the bitter sting of remorse, to own the part we have even unwittingly played in maintaining the status quo, to learn to unearth and unflinchingly examine that which has been buried, that which shame would bury once more, and to feel our anger yet again, energized to act, committed again to giving life the shape of justice. What is required of you? To act justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly on the earth, holding tenderly that to which you have given your life. May we each be held in this stillness, in this quiet we share. In this community of care and witness, we hold one another through the seasons of our lives. We lift up those joys and sorrows among us each week. We're celebrating blessings and celebration to Cordelia Brown for returning to D&D to face the blue dragon and to be his friend. And Mars is celebrating my friend Missy's successful double mastectomy and wishing them strength. Lisa Maynard, I would like to share my joy at the birth of my great-nephew. We're remembering Richard and his beautiful poetry. And Kristen Jensen is thinking of Cecilia Coronado, a dear friend who is battling colon cancer. And Catherine Welch shares, with a weary heart full of grief and gratitude, I'm visiting from the front lines in Minneapolis. We gratefully receive all prayers for resilience as the onslaught on our neighbors continues, just more quietly. Thank you for the love and the courage to keep going there and everywhere. For all that we have named aloud and for all that yet remains unspoken in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts, May each of us know that what we hold here in this room or wherever you are joining us from is held in the loving embrace of this community. And by that love beyond all naming, a love that cannot and will not let us go. As has been our practice in recent weeks, I'll ring this bell. So we ring the bells that still can ring to hold room for the grief and the rage beyond the words we have to share it. My Grandpa Lee liked to collect things. I remember his kind of magical room full of old artifacts and of hiking along trails with him looking for arrowheads, of the beautiful sets of dominoes and chess pieces in the closet down at the end of the hall. And one collection he had was of foreign coins from all around the world. Brass and silver and copper, round, hexagonal, square, thick and thin with holes in the middle, all with intriguing images. My mom, Laurel, remembers that he would bring this jar out on Sunday afternoons for the kids to look at and play with. But one day my mom, 9 years old, oldest of 4, she found that jar and decided it would be nice to have maybe just a few of those coins for herself. I can imagine her thinking, surely he won't notice just a few are missing. But of course, the next Sunday afternoon when the jar came out, he noticed. And now I'm editorializing, but I have to imagine my Grandpa Lee felt angry. This is the natural response to injustice. He felt angry when he saw some coins had been taken, angry that they were taken, angry that a child he knew and loved and trusted had betrayed that trust in some small way, angry that something was wrong in the moral fabric of the relationships. This is the essence of anger, a visceral response to the experience that something is morally off. And this moral underpinning of anger, it doesn't necessarily mean that anger should be acted upon or that any of the thoughts that surround it are justified, but the bodily experience of anger. It's an undeniably important signal. Now, Grandpa Lee, I don't think he knew who had taken the coins, but he had a plan. He was a lawyer. So he was prepared for just this kind of moment. He decided to have a trial. He gathered his children in the sitting room, and he had them testify that even though my mom had taken the coins as the oldest sibling, she was a good enough liar to cast doubt on her younger brother, Tom. By the end of the trial, it was clear to Grandpa Lee, at least, that Tom was the perpetrator. And scared and crying, Grandpa Lee took him into another room to administer some version of justice. But then another emotion changed the course of events. When my mom saw her little brother about to receive that unjust punishment, she was overwhelmed with remorse. Remorse kin to guilt and shame, but a more specific, more generative emotion. Remorse, like anger, a signal that something has run morally amok. And so, fueled by her remorse, acting in love of her brother, my mom screwed up her courage against her fear of the consequences, walked into the room, and confessed. Here's the question: if the universe were organized by a moral order, what would happen next? What would justice look like? What would love look like? 100 years ago, a young British soldier named John Ronald Reuel Tolkien wrestled with how to understand love and justice and the moral order in the face of atrocities. He fought in the Battle of Somme in 1916, one of the most gruesome, bloodiest battles in human history, watched many of his closest friends die in the mud in northern France, and then came home changed and spent the rest of his life trying to write a mythology large enough to hold what he had seen. The industrial machinery of death, the corruption of power, the complete exhaustion of people who had given everything and were being asked to give more. And into the center of that mythology, of course, he put Frodo, who was trying to live a small and ordinary life, overwhelmed by the weight of the moment, pleading to Gandalf, "I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened." And Gandalf famously answers, "So do all who live to see such times." But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time given us. We did not choose these times. This war, this overwhelm of crisis layered upon crisis. On Monday, a non-commissioned officer in our armed forces reported that his commander told the unit in a meeting, quote, "President Trump has been anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran to cause Armageddon and mark his return to earth." Among other statements justifying our attack on Iran as a holy war. There is, of course, a long history of justifying war as a holy, cleansing fire. And the biblical prophets, they do offer visions of that kind of cleansing fire. The prophet Malachi describes God coming like a refiner's fire. God, he said, will sit like as a refiner and purifier of silver, and will purify the Levites and refine them like gold and silver. There are those who try to justify the violence of empire this way. From the Crusades to the last quarter century of forever war, the so-called war on terror in the so-called Middle East. But Malachi's fire is not the bombs of an impulsive and destructive empire. Malachi speaks of a very different kind of fire, a refiner's fire. In his vision, the fire is not raining down upon the enemies, but coming for his own people, for the Levites, who he believes have lost faith in their own rituals, who, living through a time of crisis and uncertainty, tried to do all the right things. But even once they had been returned from exile in Babylon and were inhabiting the rebuilt temple, they were still living under the imperial domination of now the Persian Empire. Exhausted and disillusioned, they got cynical and numb. They checked out and brought second-rate offerings to the temple. Perhaps virtue signaling and performative politics replaced deep reflections on their values. So the prophet promised them a refiner's fire. If the holy shows up to burn away something that needs to be cleansed, it is not a vengeance, not an act of enmity, but an invitation to transformation. In another one of those old books in Daniel, he describes a furnace that is this burning fire of empire. It's Nebuchadnezzar's imperial fire, burning as a punitive and unjust fire aimed at people who refused to bow to him. You know the story, Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego? They refused to bow. And so the tyrant orders the furnace heated 7 times hotter, so hot that it kills the soldiers who are bringing them in. But when they are in, the story says there is a fourth presence. Some holy mystery that even amidst the atrocity of the worst injustice accompanies those who are cast into the fire. God is not in the fire, God is with those who burn. If the universe were well organized by a moral order, what would happen next? What would justice look like? What would love look like? In the Daniel story, the 3 who refuse to bow are protected from the fire, but we know people are dying every day needlessly in the hot fires of the violence of empire. And so, grief must be expressed as outrage. We're going to talk a lot more about this in a couple of weeks, but you know how in the 80s the government turned a blind eye to those dying of AIDS, and the activists of ACT UP had to find a way to let the love that was bursting forth as righteous anger have its rightful place in the public square. And this week, Reverend Catherine was describing to me her gentle bird-watching colleague from college preparatory school, David Robinson, taking the ashes of his lover to the White House, throwing them on the lawn. No, the holy God does not protect against the violence of empire, but I do imagine that presence there alongside David, that presence there in the ashes, holding love and justice together creates a friction. And from this friction, we get concepts like tough love and ideas of rehabilitative punishment, ideas like hell and prisons. And out of this friction emerges also amends and repair. The possibility that hurt and harm become source materials for strength and beauty. Become something that can be refined. Love that it is refined in the heat of justice. It's the kind of love that the feminist theologian Beverly Harrison, coming out of that moment of liberation, of women's liberation in the 70s, Beverly Harrison becomes one of the prominent feminist theologians of her era. And in a brilliant essay from 1981, she writes about the power of anger in the work of love. She says, the command of love is not now and never was in order to feel a certain way. Nor does the command to love create the power to feel love. It was never intended to do so. Action does that. Feelings deserve our respect for what they are. There are no right or wrong feelings. Moral quality is a property of acts, not feelings. And our feelings arise in action. The moral question, she asks, is not what do I feel, but rather what do I do with what I feel? What do we do with what we feel? In that first year after International Women's Day was coming to be, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire killed 146 people in New York City, most of them women, most of them immigrants. As they tried to flee the burning building, they were trapped by the doors, locked to keep workers from stealing fabric or from taking unauthorized breaks. There's no holy cleansing in their death, no redemption in their suffering, but the people who witnessed and loved them used that fire to refine a vision of what would be fair in our workplaces and what would be a just society. 400,000 people stood up and marched in the wake of that fire. A righteous rage took hold and people organized. Harrison says, anger is not the opposite of love. It is better understood as a feeling signal that all is not well in our relation to other persons or groups or the world around us. Anger is a mode of connectedness to others and is always a vivid form of caring. To put the point another way, anger is, she says, and it always is, a sign of some resistance in ourselves to the moral quality of the social relations in which we are immersed. Anger roils through our country and our world because there is some resistance in our souls to the moral quality of the social relations in which we are immersed. Anger roils in us as we fail to act quickly and effectively to stop a warming climate. Anger roils in us at an unjust war and imposed famine. Anger roils in us at the power amassed by billionaires, and anger roils at the cowardice of politicians. People of all political sensibilities are angry that there is something fundamentally wrong about the structure of our society. Harrison, again, she says, where anger rises, there the energy to act is present. In anger, one's body self is engaged, and the signal comes that something is amiss in relation. To be sure, anger, no more than any other set of feelings, does not lead automatically to wise or humane action. It is part of the deeper work of ethics to help us move through all our feelings to adequate strategies of moral action. But we must never lose touch with the fact that all serious moral activity, especially action for social change, takes its bearing from the rising power of human anger. Such anger is a signal that change is called for, that transformation in relation is required. And neuroscience is telling us this now quite literally, that biologically, the energy of aggression rising to protect our nervous systems from shutting down in down-regulating responses like shame or like freezing or like collapsing. Between 1600 and 1800 degrees is how hot the furnace has to be to refine silver. Into this 800-degree crucible, we put our souls. David Schnarch, the psychologist, uses that crucible as the image for the inevitable moments in our relationships when, in order to stay true to oneself and intimately connected with another, we must grow. Malachi speaks of how God, showing up in the refiner's fire, pulls us into the crucible again and again, asks us to make sense of a reality that feels more and more unbelievable, asks us to deepen our commitments to justice even when we thought we'd given it all through a first Trump administration and a pandemic, asks to show up again with real and true offerings without any proof any of it will work, with all the evidence pointing to the likelihood that the bombs will just keep dropping. And yet we are called to show up in the fire again, to feel the anger, to feel the outrage, to let it move us to act once more. Anger, your anger, is a signal that something sacred has been violated, a signal to renew a boundary, to get fierce and clear. And then to place it in the refiner's fire, because your boundaries will never be sustained by anger alone. Left in too long, the heat can damage the silver. The way the old story is told, the refiner knows the work is done because she can see her own face in the metal. To be refined by what is holy is to know that beauty, the beauty that is worth making it through the crucible for. The end of the story is that when my mom burst into the room and told her dad that she was the one who had taken the coins, he told her simply, "What you did was wrong, but what you are doing now is right." What is required of you but to act justly and love mercy and walk humbly with your God. May it be so, and amen.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? My name is Kristen Jensen, and I'm a member of your Board of Trustees. In our covenantal community, we share the responsibility for pursuing our mission by giving generously of our time, talent, and treasure. I invite you to support the work of our church through a financial contribution. There are a couple of ways of doing this. You can give electronically by scanning the QR code on your badge. And there are also QR codes on the donation envelopes in the back of the pew in front of you. Or you can put a cash or check donation into the donation envelope that you find in the back of the pew. And then when you leave the service, you can put the envelope into the donation box beside the fountain in the atrium as you leave the service. Well, I said that twice. Each week, half of our offering is shared with the nonprofit Good Neighbor organization. For March, the Good Neighbor is Project Second Chance. Project Second Chance provides free, confidential instruction in reading, writing, and spelling to English-speaking adults with literacy skills that are below 6th grade level. This nonprofit recruits, trains, and supports volunteer tutors who work one-on-one with learners in Contra Costa County to help them achieve their individual literacy-related goals and empower them in their work and personal lives. So thank you for giving generously as you are able. Will you join me in rededicating ourselves to our mission? We dedicate our offering and ourselves to the mission of this congregation, to create loving community, inspire spiritual growth, and encourage lives of integrity, joy, and service. Thank you.
Hola, can you hear me? Okay. Buenos días, me llamo Charis Amador. My name is Charis Amador. If you are new to our church and you'd like to learn more about how to get connected, I welcome you to find me or any of the greeters at the welcome table in the atrium after the service. To find out what's happening in the life of our community, you can check out the news link on the homepage of our website, where you'll find our weekly email newsletter the week ahead. This week, I want to especially lift up that today at 1 p.m. here in the sanctuary, you can join us for Raise Your Voice in Love for Justice, a workshop to learn how to be loud without burning out your voice and how to maintain a calm, open-hearted presence even when you're singing or speaking in public. Then this evening at 5 p.m., everyone is welcome at our social justice potluck. Also today, right after the service, we're hosting Pathway to Connection, Covenant, a chance to learn more about what it means to be a member of this congregation. And mark your calendars for March 21st, when we gather for Church du Soleil to celebrate the spring equinox together. More information about all of these events is on our website. Now please rise, embody your spirit, and join in singing our closing song. Gracias.
Come, we're going to say go is how it was written for this tune. We go marching, marching.
As we go marching, marching in the beauty of the day, a million darkened kitchens, 1,000 mil lost stray, are touched with all the radiance that a sudden sun discloses. For the people hear us singing, bread and roses, bread and roses.
Will you reach out a hand or touch a shoulder, reach out to the great beyond? Let us be connected. May a fire burn in you, hot enough to bake the bread and to refine in you a beauty that matches the roses. May it be so, and amen.